Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. Episode 43, The Derwent Nugget. I came across an article on a shearer who had killed a workmate on a property near Deniliquin. He was named the Derwent Nugget. This got me intrigued and I delved into finding out more about this man. The Derwent Nugget was in fact John Lagan, and he was born in 1827 in Glasgow, Scotland. His later jail records state that he was born at Londonderry, Ireland. He was convicted in Scotland at the Glasgow Court of Judiciary for 7 years transportation for stealing a pig in Glasgow on the 8th of April 1847 when he was 20 years old. The court records stated that he had been tried 5 times previously. So he sailed on the ship, the Rodney II, on the 19th of September 1851 and arrived in Van Diemen's Land on the 20th of December 1851. His convict records said he read a little, he was a labourer, 5'2", dark brown hair and dark hazel eyes. Within a few months of arriving in Van Diemen's Land, he was assigned to the Longford district, and his conduct record reads, on the 17th of May 1852, so 6 months after he was assigned, drunk and being out after hours, he received 48 hours solitary confinement. Only a few weeks later, on the 3rd of June 1852, misconduct for being out after hours, he received 4 hours in stocks. On the 1st of November 1852, he was charged with disturbing the peace and received 10 days solitary confinement. A few weeks later, he was found to be drunk and he received 7 days solitary confinement. And on the same day, he was trying to bribe the guard to free him and 2 other prisoners, so he received 2 months hard labour on top of that. 4 months after that, on the 26th of March 1853, he was found drunk and causing a disturbance, and he received 14 days solitary confinement. On the 28th of April 1853, drunk and being out after hours, receiving 10 days solitary confinement. A week later, on the 5th of May 1853, he was charged with insubordination, 12 months hard labour, and he was removed from his service at Longford and sent to Hobart. 29th of March 1854, he was found drunk and disorderly and received 4 months extension on his hard labour sentence. So there is starting to be a pattern here with an issue with alcohol. There was an article that referred to his early days in Tasmania, and it said during his stay in Tasmania he was looked upon as a hard-working man. Unfortunately, he was addicted to going on a spree when he obtained his cheque, and as is the custom to many of his class in the bush, he was accustomed to knock it down in a manner quite colonial. So again, I think alluding to the fact that he would commonly spend his paycheck by drinking. He's quite often referred to as Logan once he came to Australia. He changes his name quite a bit to suit his circumstances and to see if he can evade the law, and when he's in court, try and not have them connect the dots with previous convictions. So in this reference, he's named as Logan. He's an old Tasmanian convict and is one of the best shearers in the colonies, but his desperate and savage character makes him a most dangerous man to become associated with. He was formerly employed by the late Sir Richard Dry, Premier of Tasmania, as a shearer, and he boasts that he never robbed a man in his life. In fact, he seems to think that such an offence is quite beneath his notice, and his ambition is murder. Added to the brutal characteristic of the man, he is a brawny and powerful fellow, and altogether a most undesirable addition to the population. So not a very glowing report. So by 1868, he is mentioned in the Police Gazette, so 17 years after he arrived in Australia. And it says that a warrant has been issued by the Deniliquin bench for the arrest of John Lindsay, spelled Linsey, alias Scotty, alias Derwent Nugget, charged with feloniously stabbing John Harper at John Taylor's wool shed near Deniliquin on the 21st of October. Harper has since died of his wounds. Lindsay is supposed to have escaped to Victoria. And another warrant was issued. A warrant has been issued by the Sydney, New South Wales bench for the arrest of John Lindsay, alias Scotty, alias Derwent Nugget, charged with the murder of John Harper. Description: 44 years old, 4'11", strong build, low forehead, flat broken nose, large mouth, dark hair, cut short, clean shaved, complexion so sallow that at a short distance he resembles a Chinaman, wears a greyish blue jumper and shirt, a Scotchman. It is supposed that the above offender will endeavour to reach Tasmania, probably as a stowaway on some small craft. So the details of the death of the shearer, Harper, was featured in the Pastoral Times on the 7th of November 1868. The poor shearer, named James Harper, recently stabbed by Lindsay, the Derwent Nugget, died at Deniliquin Hospital on Sunday morning. Harper was interposing his kindly offices between the Derwenter and a person with the cognomen of Cousin Jack, who had had a row in the wool shed about 5 miles south of Deniliquin, attached to a public house owned by John Taylor, the well-known publican at Deniliquin, and kept by one of Taylor's dummies, Martin Flanagan, who only secured his licence on the 13th. Misters Wren and DeSally of Steam Plains Station, Billabong, had 4,000 sheep to shear, and the enterprising Taylor undertook the duty of shearing their sheep. The Derwent Nugget had recently been shearing at Landale's shed near to Deniliquin, and having came into town to knock down his cheque, knocked down several men in one of his sprees, and then fell into the hands of the police, by whom he was introduced to Mr. James Giles, the police magistrate of Deniliquin, and fined £5 or 3 months' imprisonment. Taylor, the publican, paid the fine for the Derwenter, who entered Taylor's shed. Derwenter had been shearing there, and the shed being in close proximity to the public house, the exciting cause was the publican's tap. Immediately Harper was wounded. The blood rushed furiously, an important branch of the artery having been wounded, and had not Flanagan, Taylor's locum tenens in the public house, acted with great promptitude and skill and compressed the thigh just above the wounded part, Harper might have died off on the spot. Having thus applied a rude kind of tourniquet, the bleeding was so far checked as to enable Dr. Wren, who was sent forward to Deniliquin, to get Harper removed to the hospital, where he lingered until Saturday. Day after day the bleeding continued more or less, but the thigh was so swollen and the man so weak that it was deemed prudent by Dr. Wren and Mr. Noyes, the surgeon, to defer tying the wounded vessel until Saturday, when the operation was attempted. The vessel was tied and Harper rallied and improved for the time, but died the next morning from exhaustion. An inquest was held by the coroner and a verdict returned wilful murder against Lindsay. On the 5th of December 1868, another mention in an article, the notorious John Lindsay, alias Scotty, alias Derwent Nugget, who is charged with murdering a man named Harper, a shearer at Deniliquin, has, it seems, been seen in the Bacchus Marsh district during the last week. It appears he was shearing at Mr. Staunton's and was recognised by a man who worked in the shed where the tragic occurrence took place. The Nugget left Exford at once when he found he was known to this man without being paid and has not been seen since. He threatened to grease his shears in the stomach of a fellow shearer who had used his oil, and altogether behaved in true Derwent style. The police of Bacchus Marsh, Melton, Gisborne, Ballon and Gordons are searching and no doubt will be successful. Nugget is a remarkable man, stout, broken nose, as if given in a pugilistic encounter, and a most villainous expression of countenance. So in other words, pretty scary appearance. A few days later, an article says the supposed murder of John Harper in a wool shed near Deniliquin lately was brought up at the police court this morning, and he was charged with the crime on remand from Heathcote. The prisoner was arrested at the Spring Creek diggings by Constable Dunn on the 2nd of December in a singing saloon, and at the time of his arrest gave the name of John Kelly. It will be seen from the following description that he is not by any means a man of prepossessing appearance. He's 44, 5 foot 8 inches high, strong build, low forehead, broken nose, large mouth, scar on his nose, short black hair, dark whiskers and moustache. It is proper to remark that the height of the man who murdered Harper is given as 5'11", The man of Kelly is only 5'8". In all other respects, his appearance answers the description of the real criminal. The case was remanded till tomorrow. The following are a few extracts from the deposition of the trooper who arrested Kelly. On the morning of the 2nd December, Constable Dunn, from information received, went to Spring Creek and in the evening visited the various singing and dancing saloons. In Jackson and Hall's singing house, he saw the prisoner, and as he answered the description of the man wanted, he apprehended him. He said, "Hello, mate, what's your name?" To which Kelly replied, "What's that to you? I won't tell you." The constable then told him that he arrested him for murder and put him in handcuffs. The prisoner admitted that he had been shearing at Winter's wool shed and that he was the man who was discharged from the shed for using bad language. The prisoner, when arrested, refused to go with the constable and raised the manacled hands to strike and appealed to the men in the saloon to aid him against the constable. Several of the miners on this said he'd have to go or they would make him. When outside, the prisoner again resisted and attempted to wrench his hands out of his handcuffs and placed himself in a fighting attitude. The constable then told Kelly that he was not on the Sydney side and that he would either take him or shoot him on the spot. With the assistance of several of the miners, the prisoner was secured and placed in a cart and conveyed to the lockup. The prisoner admitted that he had heard of a man being stabbed in a wool shed to the constable. So it's sounding like just in that short time he was at Spring Creek that he didn't seem to be well liked by the miners in the saloon. They weren't certainly going to back him up. So on the 18th of December 1868, an article titled "The Deniliquin Murder" from our Melbourne correspondent. The following evidence was taken. Detective Mainwaring stated, "I arrested the prisoner yesterday morning in the company of Detective Brown at William Brown Station on the Upper Yarra, 25 miles from Melbourne. I charged him with the murder of John Harper at Taylor's Wool Station near Deniliquin on the 21st of October. In answer to the charge, he said he was not the man, nor had he ever been to Deniliquin in his life. We brought him into Melbourne, where he was confronted with a man named Patterson, who was working on the station when the murder was committed. Patterson recognised him and said, 'You are the man who was working at Taylor's and stabbed Harper.' The prisoner still denied the accusation and repeated his former assertion that he'd never been in Deniliquin. About an hour after this, while I was taking him to the watch house, he said to Brown and I may as well tell you, men, that I am the man you are in search of, but I do not remember anything of the murder. We were all drinking up at Taylor's and I ran away into the bush in the horrors of drinking. When I came to my senses, I found myself near Moama and saw a man whom I knew driving a bullock team. He said, 'Why, Scotty, the police are after you for stabbing a man in the leg. You'd better get away over the river.' I got away over into Victoria, and that is all I know about the murder." Detective Brown merely corroborated Mainwaring's evidence as to the arrest and the confession of Lindsay. Hugh Patterson deposed, "I am a wool sorter and was working at Taylor's wool shed about 4.5 miles from Deniliquin at the latter end of October. I was working in the same shed with the prisoner who was engaged in shearing. After the work was done, the men had supper and went to the bar of Taylor's public house about 200 or 300 yards from the shed. Here the prisoner and the other man, named Cousin Jack, had a fight. They were both put out of the bar and continued to fight outside, where Scotty was knocked down and afterwards offered to fight his antagonist in the morning. At this time I left the public house, and at 12 o'clock the same night an alarm was raised that Scotty had stabbed a man who, it seems, had interfered to prevent a renewal of the fight. The man who was wounded was engaged at the shed to take up fleeces. When I came to him, he had fainted and was lying down with a blanket over him. He was stabbed in the thigh, one of the main arteries being severed. He died about a fortnight after in the hospital." The miscreant known as the Derwent Nugget, who committed the dastardly outrage upon a fellow shearer after being identified by some of his mates, has been remanded to Deniliquin. The prisoner now confesses he was the man wanted by the police, but says that he was drunk when he stabbed the man and had no intention of committing murder. And in March 1869, it said that at Deniliquin the assizes will commence on the 5th of April and that James Logan, alias John Lindsay, has been placed in the court listings for murder. On the 6th of April 1869, James Logan, known as James Logan, and John Lindsay, was committed to 2 years in Goulburn jail for manslaughter. So 2 years after his jailing, on the 14th of February 1871, another article appears with the title "The Derwent Nugget." About 2 years ago, a man named James Logan, alias the Derwent Nugget, was after a desperate resistance taken into custody on the charge of killing a man with shears at a station at Deniliquin. Today he turned up again, drunk, and was lodged in the Swanston Street watchhouse. The number of men that this desperate ruffian has already, using the slang term, made away with, it is impossible to say. But he admits to killing 3, and there is very little doubt that if he is not got rid of in some way or another, he will get drunk and murder someone else. Today he was arrested for making a disturbance within the precincts of the police court, and before he could be taken to the watch house, 3 constables had to secure him. When he was brought inside the station house, he was perfectly mad and actually kicked a hole in the asphalt floor with his foot. He then became still more violent, and before he could be got to the cell, he had to be pinioned by 6 men. A disgraceful part of the affair seems to be borne by the New South Wales authorities. When he was released from Parramatta Jail on Saturday, the sheriff asked him, "Logan, where are you going?" "Oh, I do not know," replied him. "Tasmania, I think." "Very well," he said. "I'll pay your passage." "No, you won't," says Logan. "I'll go to Victoria." The end of the matter is that his passage was paid and he got 30 shillings besides. He intimidated everyone on board the vessel that he became connected with and intimated his intention of tearing someone's vitals out. He has now only 1 shilling and 6 in his possession and is a very dangerous man. Surely the police ought to charge him under the Act for preventing convicted criminals landing in Victoria. So what they're referring to is the Criminal Influx Prevention Act, and it provided that convicts from other colonies who came to Victoria before a certain number of years had elapsed since the expiration of their original sentence were liable to 3 years imprisonment, 2 of them in irons. Logan came under this provision, and he was, on the 22nd of February 1871, ordered to find one surety of £50 that he would leave the colony within 7 days. He found the surety and then left the colony for Tasmania within the week. So on the 23rd of February 1871, it says the Derwent Nugget, John Logan, alias Lindsay, alias the Derwent Nugget, who'd been remanded on a charge of being a released prisoner from New South Wales, illegally at large in Victoria, was ordered one surety in £50 that he would leave the colony within 7 days. William Lane of the Shamrock Hotel, Napier Street, Fitzroy, went surety and promised to pay Logan's passage by the next boat to Tasmania. While waiting for the vessel, he had been stopping at the house of his surety in Fitzroy, working energetically for his benefactor, whose hotel he whitewashed and cleaned and abstained carefully from all intoxicating drinks. Knowing himself to be a perfect savage while drunk, and having been thoroughly frightened by Mr. Sturt's threat of giving him 3 years in irons if he did not clear out, he had resolved never to drink a blessed drop till he was clear of the colony, and he kept his word. The Derwent Nugget John Logan departed for Tasmania by the steamer Derwent, an appropriately named vessel, on Monday. He was escorted to the steamer by several anxious friends in the shape of detectives. And to show his joy on leaving the shores of the colony, which would not tolerate the presence of discharged convicts of other colonies, climbed onto the rigging as the vessel hauled off and gave 3 derisive cheers for Victoria, emphasising his meaning by various expressive gestures. The friends he was leaving behind made some parting signs to him, expressive of what he might expect if he returned to Victoria within the time prescribed by the law. The base insinuation was, however, treated by the Nugget with the greatest contempt. So he did avoid Victoria, but by the time 12 months later, in March 1872, I find an article at the Forbes Quarter Sessions. George Scott, alias the Derwent Nugget, pleaded guilty of assaulting a police constable in the execution of his duty, and he was sentenced to 6 months hard labour in Bathurst Jail. He mustn't have lasted too long at Bathurst Jail, as he was recorded on the 25th of March at being at Darlinghurst Jail. On the 3rd of May 1873, it says, nothing more was heard of Derwent Nugget till yesterday, when Sergeant Poultress said, "I am sure I've seen you before." The man replied that this was not improbable, and the voice vanishing in the queue, the sergeant cried, "Ha, now I remember, you're the Nugget." The man opened his mouth and chuckled till his whole frame shook, and then admitted that he was the man, remarking that he was blowed if anybody else recognised him. Logan was sent to jail for 24 hours in default of paying a fine of 5 shillings. He said he'd gone to Tasmania, to Queensland, then New South Wales, and overland to Melbourne. And at this point, he was now past the provisions of the Influx Criminals Prevention Act. So he was tried at Woodend at this time, only a month later, on the 16th of June 1873, so in Victoria, for obscene language and damage to property, under the name James Logan, and he was sent to Castlemaine Jail. A little bit of an idea of some of the misdemeanours he did while he was in jail. Obscene language, disobedience of orders, and again obscene language on the 19th of June, so 3 days after he was committed. On the 11th of July, misconduct and abusive language. On the 12th of July, refusing to work. And on the 2nd of September 1873, disorderly conduct. And the Kyneton Observer records an attempted escape of a prisoner. A party of convicts were working in a street immediately at the rear of the jail when one of their number, James Logan, suddenly started off down the street in direction of the Pound. He had not proceeded many yards before a shot was fired after him by one of the guards, and Logan stood stock till he was collared. As he ultimately refused to walk, the warders dragged him into the jail and shut him up. Logan, who is better known as the Derwent Nugget, is about 40 and was originally committed for 10 days at Kyneton, a sentence which he was foolish to magnify into 8 months by absconding. The second attempt will doubtless procure him another instalment of incarceration. So after he was placed back into custody on the 9th of December, he was refusing to work, and then on the 10th of March 1874, he was given freedom by time. It doesn't seem to appear for about 12 months, and then an article in the Borough News, which is in New South Wales. A Rowdy Properly Treated is the title. The Wagga Express says that a man named Lagan, so he's gone back to his birth name, who claims also the honour of being the Derwent Nugget, was brought up before the bench on Saturday upon charges of drunkenness, disorderly conduct and resisting police. When called upon to plead the charges, he assailed the sitting magistrate with a choice variety of the only expressions which he appears capable of giving utterance to. He subsequently gave his reason for this, a wish to get 12 months' imprisonment, as he wanted to go to Goulburn, and a perfectly intelligible acquaintance with criminal proceedings had led him to observe that prisoners sentenced by the higher courts to 12 months and over were frequently sent to Goulburn jail. His aggregate sentences, however, only reached 7 months, 1 for drunkenness and disorderly conduct, 3 for bad language and 3 for resisting police. On the 11th of December 1875, so later on in that year, at Wagga, at the police court on Thursday before F.A. Thompson, Esquire, J.P., the notorious James Lagan, alias the Nugget, again made his bow to the bench, this time charged with assaulting Constable Fitzpatrick and handling the officer's clothes with an indelicate carelessness that they were damaged to the extent of £3. The Nugget was arrested at the Commercial Hotel, where he was airing that choice vocabulary of forcible language of which he is so perfect a master. It is almost needless to say the playful Nugget had been unwisely indulging in strong drink, and the bench gave him an opportunity of studying jail discipline for 3 months on the charge of assaulting the constable, 14 days for being drunk, and 2 months more in default of payment of £3 damages to the policeman's clothes. So a little over 12 months later, January 1877, at the Yass Court of Petty Sessions, vagrancy. James Lagan, Edward Vipond and John Lewis were placed on the dock charged under the Vagrancy Act. The 3 were able-bodied men and strangers to the people of this district. The case of James Lagan was taken. He was a short, thick-set man of about 45, a fighting appearance. Inspector Brennan said he was knocking about town for the last 3 or 4 days in the company of the other defendants. He went into the Royal Hotel last night and abused the landlord, Mr. Hart. His conduct has been most disorderly. I saw the prisoner yesterday knocking about the town. I saw him several times. Last night before I apprehended him, he was creating a great disturbance in front of Mr. Hart's hotel, and he was shouting. I told him to go away, and he defied me and said in a loud voice that he did not care for me or for the magistrates. After I brought him up to the lock-up and searched him and found 1 shilling on him, he said he came from Victoria. This morning he said he came from Maitland Jail. It was at 11 o'clock last night I arrested him. He was not drunk but had been drinking. And the bench asked the prisoner, have you got any questions to ask the constable? And the prisoner said, not the slightest. It is all the same, for I intend to remain in jail until I'm taken out of it by force. And then the sub-inspector Brennan said, "I believe your worship, he is not often out of it." And Lagan said, "I am not often out of it. Well, I will be less in future. I believe it is the best place to be." And Lagan said, "I am 2 nights in this town and I could not get lodgings. I offered a shilling for a bed in a house last night and I could not get it. I slept in a paddock last night like a dog, and I will not do it any more while there are good beds in jail." The bench said, "I cannot convict on the evidence tendered." Constable Campbell deposed, "I saw the defendant knocking about the streets of Yass for the last 2 or 3 days. He was loafing, he did no work. I saw Mr. Hart turn him out of his hotel last night. I heard him then using very bad language." And the prisoner asked, "Where was I when you saw me first?" And the witness said, "Well, I have seen you the day before yesterday at Laidlaw's." The prisoner said, "Was I loafing there?" And the witness said, "You were putting some boxes on a dray." The prisoner said, "I was at work when you saw me. What bad language did you hear me make use of?" And the witness said, "You called him a something old lag." And the prisoner said, "No, I did not. I called him an old lag. It was he who called me a something old lag. I'll not ask you any more questions." The bench said, "You are discharged." And the prisoner said, "I don't want to be discharged. I'll go to jail. I have tried for work and can't get it. I have to sleep out at night like a dog." The bench said, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself, a strong, able-bodied man like you who could earn an honest livelihood." The prisoner said, "Well, you see, I'm not ashamed. I can work and have been a long time trying to work, and I don't intend to try any more while there is a jail here." The bench said, "You are discharged and you had better leave the town at once, or else you are brought before me again. You will be sent for a longer term to jail than you would wish." And the prisoner said, "Well, you see, I'll not leave the town. I'll stay at Yass as long as I like." Here the police had to turn him out of the courthouse. And lo and behold, 3 days later, Yass Court of Petty Sessions, alleged housebreaking. James Lagan, the individual who figured in our police court report of last issue, was placed on the dock charged with having, on Monday, feloniously broken open a shop in Cooma Street and stolen certain watches and chains to the value of £5 and upwards, the property of Mr. Charles Latham. Charles Latham deposed, "I have a watchmaker and jeweller's business in Yass. On Monday last, I heard the shop window smashed. I went into the shop and saw the prisoner taking out my watches through the broken pane of glass. Before I got on the footpath in front of the shop, my son had knocked the prisoner down. I then held him down and my son took 5 watches from him. I produced one of these watches. It is a Waltham and valued at £6. The prisoner had 2 silver watch chains and a common chain in his hand when I came to assist my son. These articles are my property. After the prisoner was knocked down, the watches fell out of his hand, but he retained the chains. I saw the prisoner and another man on Tuesday week together in Cooma Street." The prisoner said, "You are wrong, sir." And the witness said, "They passed my place about 9 o'clock on the night of last Tuesday." To the bench, the watches were exhibited for show and sale in the window. They were suspended from a rod in the window. The prisoner removed them. He broke the glass of a fancy clock. And then the bench asked the prisoner, "Do you wish to put any questions to the witness?" And the prisoner said, "No, only that he told an infernal lie when he said that he saw me on Tuesday week." And the bench said, "That is no question, and you must not speak so to the witness. Have you any questions to put to him?" So the prisoner asked, "Did you see me last Tuesday week?" The witness said, "Yes, I saw you in company with another man." The prisoner said, "That's a lie. I left Goulburn on Sunday and it took me 3 days to come to Yass. So you see that I did not come here until the Wednesday. What do you swear to a lie for?" The bench said, "You must not call the witness a liar." Constable Campbell deposed, "The prisoner was given into my custody by Mr. Latham Monday last. I charged him with breaking into a dwelling and stealing goods to the value of £3 or over. He made no reply." The bench administered the usual caution, said that the prisoner was not obliged to make any statement, but if he did, the words would be taken down and used in evidence at his trial. The prisoner said, "Well, I have nothing at all to say. It was my intention to clear the whole window of what I could get and make off with it to pay my expenses back to Tasmania." The bench asked, "Can you write?" And the prisoner said, "I can write my own name, but I cannot read." The prisoner signed his name on the statement, was formally committed for trial at the Court of Quarter Sessions to be held at Yass on the 7th. He was charged with 5 years on the roads on the 7th of February 1877 at Yass, and he was in Parramatta Jail in June 1878. He was also sent to Darlinghurst On the 8th of February 1882, in the Gazette, there was a return of prisoners to be discharged from Darlinghurst Jail in the month of February 1882, and James Logan, alias the Derwent Nugget, was in that list. Only 8 months later, he's featured back in Victoria, and the article is titled A Desperate Man. James Logan, alias the Derwent Nugget, a character who is notorious for his deeds of desperation and who has been in jail in the greater part of his lifetime for various crimes and offences, including manslaughter, came before the City Police Court today on charges of drunkenness and assault. He came into court wearing a most dilettante air and looked like one ready to perpetrate the most atrocious acts imaginable. Constable Wardley of the King section of the police commenced to tell the bench that he locked up the prisoner yesterday on a charge of drunkenness. In consequence of the limited number of cells, he was put into a cell with a quiet-looking young fellow called John Brennan. They were not together long before Brennan was heard by Wardley to cry out, and going into the cell he found the violent old criminal biting the first finger of Brennan's left hand. With much difficulty he was forced to let go of his hold, the young man's finger being almost chewed off. The blood was over Logan's face and dropped off his beard. Brennan was at once removed to the hospital and the finger treated there. Detective O'Callaghan gave the court an idea of the prisoner's character. He had served 12 years for manslaughter, having killed a man somewhere in the Murray district with shears many years ago. He was well known at the Castlemaine jail, where he brutally assaulted a warder and served 18 months for it. And he had just been liberated from the Tasmanian jail after doing 5 years with lashings for a serious crime. In fact, he is associated with almost every serious offence possible to commit, but which could not be found on the records without a little trouble. In answer to his worship, he said, "If he didn't put his finger into my mouth, I wouldn't have bit it. He ought to have kept his finger in his pocket." His worship then fined him 5 shillings for drunkenness and sent him to prison for 1 month without the option of a fine for his brutal act of violence. So he is recorded at being at the Latrobe Jail on the 24th of March 1883, receiving 3 months. He's listed as 58 years old, 5'1.5", dark brown hair, scar inside his right arm near the elbow, and a large scar inside his right wrist. 2.5 years later, it is mentioned in the Wagga Advertiser, so back up in New South Wales, drunkenness. James Logan, alias the Derwent Nugget, was charged with being drunk and disorderly and pled guilty, was fined £1 and a default of 1 week's imprisonment. The same prisoner pleaded guilty to a charge of using obscene language and was fined £5 or in default of 3 months imprisonment. Then goes a little quiet, and the next time I see a record on him is in the Launceston Invalid Depot on the 31st of May 1886, and he is admitted into this Invalid Depot as a pauper. He stays in there from the 31st of May until the 21st of June. He's then placed in a similar establishment at Campbelltown in Tasmania on the 7th of July 1886 to the 15th of July 1886. And then about 18 months later, in the Launceston Examiner, a noted character named James Logan, alias the Derwent Nugget, was brought up before Mr. Arthur Whitfield JP at the police court today on the charge of using threatening language towards Constable Thompson on Monday and was sentenced to 3 months imprisonment. Logan, it appears, was taken in charge for being drunk and incapable, and on his way to the lockup became rather troublesome and threatened to stab the apprehending constable. I then find a recollection that was stated that at Germantown, New South Wales, so now what's known as Howlong, that there was a link to the Derwent Nugget and Harry Power the Bushranger that I covered in episode 23. It says at Barcoo, a station near Germantown, New South Wales in the year 1890, 2 notorious men were shearing as penmates. One was the Derwent Nugget, the other Power the Bushranger. Both had served long terms of imprisonment. The Nugget's little trouble was the murder of a picker-up and tar boy who had goaded him beyond control. The Nugget plunged the sheep shears into the youngster's side. Power had only been out a couple of years after doing a score for highway robbery. So interesting finding him up in southern New South Wales near the Victorian border. So James Logan alias Derwent Nugget, is then arrested at Rochester, the north of Victoria near Echuca. On the 5th of February 1892, he was charged with obscene language and received 1 month in jail. And it stated on that record that he'd had 15 previous convictions. Then by September 1892, he's back up in New South Wales. At the Wagga Police Court on Thursday, James Logan was fined 1 shilling for drunkenness on the railway. So he's gone from Victoria to New South Wales, and now by December 1892, he's back at the Launceston Invalid Depot as a pauper, and he was discharged to the police on the 8th of December 1892, no doubt for having to answer to other charges. And this is where I find a jail record for James Logan, as he is listed as. It's also got on his record alias Derwent Nugget, that on the 9th of December 1892, he was charged with the breach of regulations and jailed for 1 month. And his particulars are a labourer, height 5 foot, age 68, a fresh complexion, grey hair, grey whiskers, dark eyebrows, hazel eyes, where he's stating that he was born, Londonderry, Ireland. And the previous convictions listed in Tasmania: 20th of January 1891, obscene language, jailed for 6 months. 4th of April 1893, idle and disorderly, received 6 months. November 1895, idle and disorderly, 8 months. 3rd of May 1894, larceny, 6 months. What is also on this Tasmanian record are his misdemeanours in Victoria and New South Wales. So it lists Castlemaine, 16th of June 1873 for obscene language, 20 days. 15th of February 1871, at large in Victoria. 17th of December 1868, remanded for murder. 22nd of February 1868, insulting behaviour, 3 days. And the 15th of February 1867, unlawfully using a home, 1 week, solitary confinement. In New South Wales, in the criminal court on the 5th of April 1869 for murder. In Forbes on the 29th of February 1872 for assaulting police, 6 months. Wagga Police Office on the 9th of December 1875 for drunk assaulting police and damaging a uniform. He got a total of 6 months and 7 days. And then in the Forbes Quarter Sessions on the 7th of February 1877 for larceny, he got 5 years on the roads. By the 7th of April 1893, in Tasmania, in the police court at Ulverstone, it says that James Logan, alias the Derwent Nugget, a notorious bad character, was charged with having been idle and disorderly and sentenced to 6 months imprisonment in Launceston jail. A plea of guilty was recorded. After doing his time, he's mentioned again in Launceston in November 1893. James Logan, alias the Derwent Nugget, who'd surrendered himself to Sub-Inspector Pilling because he was unable to get work, was charged with vagrancy and sentenced to 3 months imprisonment. Logan asked for 6 months but said 3 would do him for a start and he would soon get more as he could not get work. He was 59 and would live 25 years more, and the government would have to keep him. In 1896, at the police court in Goulburn, New South Wales, on Saturday, March the 21st, James Logan was charged on suspicion with being of unsound mind. Mr. Tibbets gave evidence to the effect that the accused acted very strangely. His opinion was that the man was not safe to be at large, and the bench ordered the accused to be sent to the Yass Jail Hospital for 3 days medical observation. And then there's nothing else for about 3 years, and then he pops up again in Tasmania. And this is the Northwestern Advocate and Emu Bay Times on the 9th of January 1899. James Logan, alias the Derwent Nugget, was charged with being an idle and disorderly person with no lawful visible means of support. Superintendent Driscoll related to the bench that the accused had been on the previous afternoon been chasing boys with a tomahawk, using obscene language and his demeanour generally very threatening one. As there was evidence against several convictions against him, the prisoner was sent to jail for 2 months. So he's released from jail, and within 5 days, the Northwestern Advocate and Emu Bay Times again records an unwelcome visitor, a powerful fellow named James Logan, alias the Derwent Nugget, who had previously established an unenviable notoriety in these parts, has made an appearance in the paddock attached to the residence of Mr. J.L. Watkinson, nurseryman at Devonport on Thursday evening, and forthwith proceeded to pitch his tent. Later in the evening, it appears Logan lit a fire at the camp, and the proprietor of the property approached him with a view of having the fire extinguished, and at the same time requesting the intruder to change his quarters. The Nugget, however, assumed a defiant attitude, seized a tomahawk and brandished it in a threatening manner. Mr. Watkinson said he would bring the police if Logan persisted in staying there, and as the caution failed to have the desired effect, the police were informed of the state of affairs. Constables Leake and Nielsen made all haste to the spot, but on arrival they found that Logan had decamped. A fortnight later, the Derwent Nugget, James Logan, alias Derwent Nugget, was apprehended and brought before the police court at East Devonport on Wednesday, charged with vagrancy. This charge was withdrawn and the prisoner had to answer one of assaulting Mr. J. Watkinson. After hearing evidence, he was sentenced to 2 months' imprisonment and was subsequently sent to Launceston in charge of the police to serve his sentence. He had been placed into the New Norfolk Hospital as an admission on the 24th of April 1899, so only a month into his 2-month sentence. And it seems that he has stayed in that hospital as he died on the 7th of May 1905 in the New Norfolk Hospital, aged 78. So a very long criminal career by the Derwent Nugget, and by all accounts quite a dangerous and unpredictable man. So just from that little inkling of that criminal case in Deniliquin, I think this is indicative of quite a number of men who came out to the country and found that due to us having different colonies at the time and being able to assume different aliases, they were able to float in and out quite easily. And it seems for him, being a career criminal, he got to the point in his life where he couldn't really survive unless he was in jail. If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes